This podcast was recorded on June 25th, 2017. By the time you hear it, things may have changed. Welcome to Black Women Talk Politics. I'm Sheila Strain-Clark.
And I am Sabria Williams.
And welcome back. It's been a busy 2 weeks.
Crazy 2 weeks. I feel like I want to start off by saying Eid Mubarak because Saturday was Eid. And for those of you who do not know, Eid is the culmination of Ramadan, which is the Muslim holiday where during Ramadan you fast. And it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. But having said that and having, wished all my Muslim brothers and sisters a happy Eid Mubarak, the president, 45, decided that he was going to break with a 20-year White House tradition, which actually was started by Thomas Jefferson in 1805, if you believe it. But for the last 3 administrations, Clinton, Bush 2, and Obama, they've held an Eid al-Fitr, which is a celebration to mark the end of Ramadan, but they've done it at the White House, where Muslim dignitaries from across the country, dignitaries and diplomats, have been invited to the White House, and they come and they have a dinner, and so that is, and a show of solidarity and unity, which now we recognize this president obviously really wants to rub in that that's not what he's doing, and that he really does believe that all Muslims are not good people. In fact, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson also broke with decades of tradition by rejecting the Eid al-Fitr reception at the State Department, which they normally do as well. So, I feel like this is the reoccurring theme of the administration, that Muslims are bad, and that we're not going to do anything to bring together Muslims of the United States or anywhere else because they're all bad. And for Trump not to have this celebration, it's mean. It's political, but it's mean for him, and he's trying to police his base. But it would have been such a show of solid, even if nobody hadn't come. And then that was the thing, that they believed nobody was going to come, and we know he likes numbers. Mm-hmm. And so without these numbers, it would have been a dent on him.
But it was a moment.
It was a moment
that he could have utilized to actually take the opportunity to extend the olive branch,
and then say, you know what, I did it, and they did, and I'm trying to make better with my ways. And even if nobody came, he could say, I still did this.
And I think people would have come.
Of course they would have come. It's the White House.
Right, exactly.
And it's an opportunity for them to then maybe have a face-to-face and have their moment with him.
I think that this administration, because there's constant jokes that you see him make. I think this week he made a joke that said something to the extent of, they don't really like me, or something like that. So I think he's quite all right with
not being liked.
Right, because he said, hey, his whole end game always was, I won. Yes. And he's never really been at any point in time saying, hey, I'll be your president too, or any of that stuff. No. So,
and he won not being nice, and he won not being friendly, and not unifying. And so you're right to think that he would come into to the White House and into the presidency with an open mind and maybe a change of heart to unify is, maybe good wishful thinking on my part. But if he didn't, we can't expect much from him, which is sad, makes me sad. But Eid Mubarak.
Well, this was quite a week. Since we've been gone, there's been a lot of news happening. Right. And some of the news continues at times to just be depressing or scary. We had more incidents in London since we were here again. or since we were here now. So London continues to just be a target. We saw something very close to home, which I think surprised all of us, because we always talk about D.C. being the bubble. And even though we are in the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., and we know that we're in the capital, and clearly the capital is vulnerable, we usually don't live in that experience.
No.
But last week in Alexandria, in preparation for this baseball game that happens that brings Republicans and Democrats together, Representative Steve Scalise, who was from Louisiana, was one of 4 people who was shot by a Bernie Sanders advocate, I guess, you know.
I guess he was a zealot. I would say zealot, dare I say, for Bernie Sanders, and just a Trump hater.
Because actually he volunteered during Bernie Sanders' campaign, so it came out. And so he shot 4 people. In addition to Scalise, Crystal Griner, who was a U.S. Capitol Police officer, Zach Barth, who was a staff member for Representative Roger Williams of Texas, and Matt Mika, who was a lobbyist for Tyson Foods and a former congressional aide. So clearly this is wrong.
That's all.
And, you know,
hate is hate.
Hate is hate.
No
and just
throw a Democratic donkey on it or a Republican elephant.
So I think the way that both sides handled this was great in terms of, you know, first of all, of course, everybody's concerned for Steve Scalise. He was in intensive care. From what I understand, his condition is getting better. But I'm sure it was terrifying for him and for all these people, for their families. The game had record attendance. Yeah. So I think the DMV area really came out, as well as the members of Congress and their staff and their families. And it was a real bipartisan moment. And you know, that's a good thing. It's a shame that we need, or there has to be something tragic for there to be this bipartisan effort. So it's, you know, that is and I want to reiterate that it's, you know, because we have on our podcast talked incessantly about how hate has risen on the other side, and this is an example of how the side that, you know, we're more partial to is now lashing out, and it's wrong. We are standing with the representatives and the folks that were shot, because those are the victims. And so I just want to make that clear, because I know when you're hearing a show that might be partisan to, you know, one side or partial to one side of the aisle, that when things happen on the other side, it is our due diligence to show compassion. It is our due diligence to say this is wrong, because in the end, that's real politics, right? It's having a difference of opinion, but being able to respect everybody on each side. And so I know we wanted to make sure that was heard, that we are sympathetic to and feel compassion and denounce 150% this man. Whatever you feel, violence is not the solution or the answer. No, it's not. But it also underscored for me, and I know folks didn't really want to talk about gun control, but however, to me, this is, you know, I don't know how much more data we need in this country, that we need serious reform on our gun laws. I mean, we've had Sandy Hook, where kids were massacred. We had the Pulse shooting in Florida. Yep. We had Senator Gifford, who was shot in the head. We have these 4 folks. I mean, we have the most violent nation when it comes to gun crimes, yet we have this powerful lobbying machine called NRA, who tends to support, you know, GOP candidates, including Trump, and, you know, therefore they're lobbying many times for gun control to become more lax. And at the expense of how many more children, how many more families. So I want to say I was hopeful until I started doing some more research that maybe this would prompt those folks on Capitol Hill to really take a look at what's going on. But, you know, the feedback that I was seeing online was it's nothing's going to change. I mean, if Senator Gifford got shot in the head.
Yep. Or Sandy Hook, where they're innocent children.
Right, where the children were killed. Or even the Pulse nightclub shooting, you know, where...
Or in Chicago, where daily. I mean, Chicago is its own example of gun control by itself.
So I would hope that at some point folks who are just so caught up in the right to carry on arms will wake up and understand how much bloodshed is being caused by the lack of their willingness to take a hard line on certain pieces of gun control that make sense. So that is the other piece that came up. I'm not condoning this in any way, shape, or form, but I do think, again, we have another opportunity, and from what I'm seeing, it's a missed opportunity, and we're not getting any action or conversation on gun control.
No. And I guess we're going to go into Philando Castile.
Right.
The verdict. And in case you hadn't heard, he was acquitted, right? So there's
the police officer.
He was found not guilty.
The police officer who killed him in front of his girlfriend and his daughter.
Geronimo Yanez of St. Paul, Minnesota. And it was for reasonable fear, right? So he was reasonably feared that just because he was with a black man, he was going to get shot.
A black
and
man.
That's my summation of it. And I know it's I don't want to minimize, but that's really what it is. So if you have black skin, then I feel like at this point, a police officer can say, I was reasonably feared, even though I'm going for the license that you told me to go for, not the gun that I already have, and I'm telling you I'm not going to go for. And in that split second, you became. He shot him. I mean, that was it. It was, give me your license, not your gun, because he was forthcoming with that. He was like, I have a gun, but the gun was licensed. He was allowed to have it, and so in front of his daughter and his girlfriend, he was murdered.
And this just continues. If you look online, a lot of times you see people are saying, black people, I do the wrong things, I get killed. I do the right things, I get killed. I put my hands up, I get shot. I put my, I run away, I get shot.
Yeah.
And it's extremely hurtful.
It is.
In our community to know, as a black man, you are not safe.
No.
We liken what's happening now to the lynchings that happen. It's a public disregard. It's just as public as people hanging from trees.
Yep.
Because it's broadcast all over the internet that all lives don't matter. No. And it's really painful. And I think that clearly the black community gets that. It becomes really challenging when you see other communities and they don't understand. They are offended by Black Lives Matter or
just by the conversation that, hey, because the assumption is that something had to have happened. But if we're going down with all of these names, Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, Philando Castile, everybody, just going on and on and on, everybody they're not all criminals. They're not. In fact, none of them were criminals. Nobody had done anything worth losing their life for. And so just the idea that you panic and that there is reasonable fear for skin color is beyond me. And that has to be the assumption, because that's where we are. Because there are millions of traffic stops across the country every year.
Right.
And the only ones that we hear about where there's somebody who is shot dead generally is somebody with brown skin.
So now there's training happening in the community, which I think we as mothers of black boys are seriously, you have to start saying to yourself also, at what age do I tell them this? I, as a mother, really struggle with at what point do I shatter the image of a police officer? Because the image right now that I'm putting forward to my child is they help you.
Public safety.
They're helpers. If they ask you to do something, do it. I don't want to ruin their perception of a police officer, because I feel like at this juncture, I kind of feel like they're too delicate for me to give them all of the information. Yet and still,
Tamir Rice was 12.
Right.
So maybe is it 10?
Yeah.
9?
Right. And this is the question, because at a certain point you have to say, here's the other side of things. Police officers do kill people that look like you, and you have to be double, triply smart. So it's not just, if I could just say, do what they say,
right,
and leave it at that,
that's
and
easy.
feel comfortable that would be enough, believe that's all I would say. But I know enough now to know it's not just do what they say, because I'm assuming, like you said, he went to get the light. I mean, that's what they tell you to do. Show your license and your registration. So now I have to say, put your hands up. Don't move.
Don't be threatening.
Just
what does that mean?
Just sit there and be a statue. Ask them to get your license for you. I mean, and then you might be getting smart.
Right.
So then, are you being disrespectful?
Right.
And then, there's a charge for that.
But see, and that's the thing. And so how do you teach your child not to be threatening? What does that even mean? Don't be threatening. Don't be you. I mean, so if my black son is confident and knowing that I am not doing anything wrong, and no, you are an authority figure, I'm not being disrespectful by saying, hey, where's your warrant, or where is your right to do this? Why have I been stopped? And you automatically then become threatening. Then you automatically could be in these positions where reasonable fear can come up. And so that's the thing. It's like it's such a gray area that it doesn't. Threatening is your idea of what that is, and my idea is two different things. Yeah. And so
when you're the police officer, and I'm not, your opinion is the one that matters because if I take your life, there's no one that's going to find me not guilty in almost every situation. But if you take my life, almost in every situation. You will be able to walk away and be with your family.
And even going back to Yanez, the officer that shot Philando, and the prosecutor portrayed him as a nervous officer who lost control. Well, so that is, there it is. So why there should be a charge for that, but there's a charge for nothing, because it's obviously not commonplace to have a traffic stop and then somebody dies. So there should be. My thing is there. There should be some
responsibility. Is it okay to be a nervous officer? Right. I mean, is that okay?
And that's because it was portrayed like that. Doesn't mean that that's what they found. They obviously didn't find.
I don't think you should be able to go out with a gun until you have passed a variety of different tests, not just competencies in terms of handling a gun, but mental fitness, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure there's nervousness for every career, but there's some careers where the threshold has to be raised because you have the ability to take someone's life. It's not a paperwork error that we're talking about.
And I feel like we need to have some cultural competency training on these police forces. Some serious where we're trained. We're talking about how as mothers and families we're going to have to train our boys. We really need to there has to be a component in here for these officers to be trained, and I don't know what that is, but I feel like it's warranted. I feel like if they're going to continue, if they're continuing to get these police officers off, that's one thing. But we need to be able to do something about that, especially, but definitely about how are you being trained on the force? What is there? This is now an issue. This is a thing, and we need to make it so it's not a thing.
And there was an article this week on an officer who is training other officers. He's a black officer, and he's training them. And the name of his training program is something provocative, like reformed racist or something to that nature. That is really trying to, I'm sure, tease out the implicit biases and racism that exists, really in all people. Yeah. And being honest and transparent about understanding what your biases are, how you respond, and trying to create a different response. So I do applaud him for doing that. I think more police forces need to do that. I'm sure that there are lots of things happening on police forces to try to combat this. This is not a good issue for them, I'm sure. But
PR nightmare.
The bottom line is we continue to lose lives. Folks continue to get off. And I also want to go back to the NRA for a second, because another piece that came up that I found interesting was they were saying the NRA has been silent about this whole thing. And so why does that matter? Well, he was a licensed carrier of a firearm, right? He was not, it wasn't an illegal weapon. He didn't steal it, buy it off of the black market. So this is your customer. This is who you say you represent. Absolutely. So here goes one of your people shot dead when he tried to say I have a legal firearm and tried to follow the process, and the NRA is silent. So the NRA's customer is not black men, obviously. They'd rather just continue to portray our men as criminals.
As why their customers need the guns.
Right. So, right. So, I mean, that was another piece where this gun advocacy is not for everyone.
No.
Because I'm sure there's somebody who in their mind was like, well, he shouldn't have had that gun.
Right.
If he didn't have that gun, he wouldn't be dead now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The same people that say everyone should have the right to bear arms.
Yeah.
So the hypocrisy is incredible. So I know we were going to talk a little bit too about Otto Warmbier. Okay,
Warmbier.
thank you. So this story was very sad.
Yeah.
And confusing in some ways because you just kind of think about North Korea and the craziness of the whole situation. So this young man went to North Korea for a New Year's trip in December of 2015.
Yep, he was a junior at UVA, University of Virginia.
Right, and he went with a tour, Young Pioneers Tour, a group that promises fun, thrill-seeking adventure at a great price. So this has been talked about a little bit in the media as, a trip that affluent young people go on. It's a lot of partying. It's a lot of hanging out, and they're going through different locations
that you wouldn't normally go to. And so thrill seeker. So yeah, you have to be a thrill seeker to decide I'm going to go to North Korea where nobody is even trying to get me to go to, right?
Right. So
and they don't want us there. So
well, I mean, and I think just anyway, he went, and so other people go, and so there was a poster or something like that in his hotel room, and so he decided to, allegedly, I guess that's important to say as well. Allegedly, he
was found guilty of it.
Okay.
So he was found guilty in North Korea of stealing, and he actually admitted to and apologized for stealing.
But he was also put on TV to do that apology, right? It was, and so you never know if it's under duress. I mean, none of this stuff you really know, but
you're absolutely
because they make people confess this stuff all the time. But supposedly he stole a poster or something from a hotel room, and then he got caught, and then they sentenced him to 15 years of hard labor. So just that, I mean, I really have not been an expert on foreign affairs at all. So just understand. I mean, you see all this stuff on TV about North Korea and the bombs and the guy that's the ruler and
Kim Jong Un. Kim Jong Un. I think that's his name. I'm gonna
him.
It, yeah.
So you're like, wow, North Korea is crazy. I'm never gonna go there. But then to hear that, and I'm not trying to make it right, but people steal stuff from hotels all the time. Some people steal
Shampoo,
the little soaps, the towels, the robes, I mean, people steal stuff from hotels all the time, and it's not right, and you shouldn't do it. But
you shouldn't get 15 years of hard labor.
To think that stealing a poster, you get 15 years of hard labor, and then within basically a couple, I think it was a month or
2 weeks maybe,
into his sentence, he was in a coma. So what was the hard labor that they had this man doing? That he would be, basically right after he started serving his sentence, he would be in a coma.
Yeah.
It's really concerning. And then after working back channels and diplomatic relations, et cetera, they were able to negotiate for his release. But when he came home, he was in a coma and he died. And it's really tragic.
And it's interesting because we want to go away and we want to travel. And I mean, I'm going to China in August. But we have to realize that we have freedoms and liberties here that are not recognized, and people are not happy with us. And as unfortunate, unfair as it is, that's the reality. And when you are in somebody else's country on their soil where our rights do not matter, we have to be due diligent in paying attention to that. And unfortunately, Otto Warmbier is a very, very hard lesson. And I feel for his mother and his father and his family, because this should never have been the outcome for whatever the flag or whatever it was that he stole or allegedly stole or didn't steal. It's just sad. It's a horrible outcome, and it's a sad way for a young man, who hadn't really, reached his potential to go. And so I don't know what our retaliation or response is going to be. But I mean, 45 did make a statement and was saying how he did say that he was a psychopath. The Korean Trump called the psychopath who allegedly was considered to and allegedly thought he was going to strike on North Korea. I don't believe that that's going to happen. I believe that's obviously a smokescreen, but he has to say something. But I feel like he probably could have done a better job of being more compassionate towards his family. I feel like 45 could have used this as an opportunity to perhaps even try again, unify and say, hey, as a country, we are strong. This is not how we would do. We are not going to, but there's never going to be a unifying message, I don't think.
I see Trump and the leader of North Korea. We'll just call him Kim because I'm going to mess up his whole name. But I honestly, in a lot of ways, see them very similarly. They're these big, powerful children.
Yeah, right.
And they both have this "it's my way" or the highway philosophy. And two children, two bullies, will never negotiate. And because of their wealth, power, and geography, they won't fight or battle. Right, exactly. But we have two giant kids ruling two very important nations. And so but I'll tell you what, North Korea, that was a wake-up call for me, just in terms of seeing how dangerous it is for Americans there. And we can't take that lightly. So I do definitely sympathize with Otto's family, and I just it's one of those things where I think also too, just to add to, he was only 21 years old. So it just is another note for us as women, as parents, that going back even to the comment about the police, like one of our things that we really have to do and continue to do is be really sensitive to, the environment that our kids are operating in, and try to be as perceptive as we can be. I'm sure his parents would have never anticipated this
ever,
but this is just kind of the pieces that each one of us, as this world is rapidly changing. It's just be aware and trying to make sure that we help our kids make their decisions and really educate them before they put themselves in precarious situations, as much as we
not
can.
That we could have ever anticipated that stealing a flag would have gotten him 50 years of hard labor.
Not at all. Absolutely. I mean,
ridiculous.
You wish you could see the future, but you never can. It's always hindsight.
Always hindsight.
Well, we're going to talk about the big race in Georgia. We're going to switch gears. We're going to bring it. I was going to say we're going to bring it up a notch in terms of news, but this news kind of sucks too.
Yeah, it's not good. It's definitely nowhere near the other stories we've talked about, but it is definitely a blow. So
the Handel Oscoff. So in Georgia, there was going to be this big runoff, right? Yep. So they were running, and this part of Georgia is interesting, as I understand it, because you have Fulton County.
Yeah.
So you have several other counties as well, but there's a good portion of folks of color that were impacted by this. I think Atlanta as well, maybe, was part of this area.
Yes.
Okay. And so, go ahead, Sabrina. I know you're going to talk a little bit about it.
No, I was just saying. I mean, and it was what I was going to say. My biggest point is that we're hearing the news and we're in our silos, and we feel like everybody is so incensed about the Republicans and the Republican Party and everything that's going on. And then how does this happen? How does she win this? How does Karen Handel? How does she come up with it? And it doesn't matter. And then the Democrats poured millions of dollars into this race towards the end. But it's really about we have to do a grassroots effort. So you have these people who are not changing their mind, and because we are so divided, that it doesn't matter. They're sticking to their guns and even sticking to what's not in their best interest. And so I feel like we fell asleep at the wheel thinking that because Trump was in office, and I think that's probably what happened there, that everybody was going to be so upset about that she was not going to win, that he was going to be the candidate. And then here we are again, like November, shocked and appalled, like, how does this happen? I mean, I feel like during that same time, there were four Democrats that lost. It wasn't just him. He was the biggest.
Yeah.
But
it was several other places where we lost. Trump made a point of saying,
right.
Sometimes the obnoxiousness is annoying, but sometimes it's funny because he said, all I do is win, win, win. I think DJ Khaled would be repulsed that he tried to do that soundbite right there. But they're at 5-0.
Yep.
And so, here's the things that I heard said this morning on one of the politics shows that does the weekly roundup. And they said, listen, first of all, this seat, all the places where Trump picked people to be in his cabinet, it wasn't accidental.
No.
These were strategic picks where they thought they could still hold that state, hold that seat. So anyone who thought just that we were going to go in there and just make a red state blue that they knew would, as far as the statistics were concerned and the likelihood, they knew that those seats would likely stay red.
Right.
So, they didn't pick someone from Philadelphia, for example, or New York City. Right. They didn't pick those people because they knew that those seats would go. California, no, they picked people deep in those red states, right? And so the other thing that they talked about was that, yes, this was a loss, but part of the reason there was so much money raised was because this was the only game in town. Right. So it wasn't like people thought, we have this really great chance here. Right, I mean, this guy was 30 years old. He didn't even have really a resume to really say that. I mean, Karen Handel, I don't know that much about her, but I do know she's a career politician person.
She's not 30.
So she's been around, and so she had some a reputation in her area. The other thing that they talked a lot about was how Ossoff was partnered up with Pelosi.
Yeah.
So apparently that really hurt him in terms of how folks feel. They talked about her San Francisco values and things like that.
And it's just that when you're in the South, I think at this point it's just if you're attaching yourself to anything that is, the run-of-the-mill Washington, nobody is really going to be looking at you. They're not checking for you. They want you need to not be the quote unquote, run-of-the-mill politician. You got to be something else in order for the reds to come to blue. Right. You cannot be, so that's what that was about. It's like, they're not, I'm going to go with what I know if you're going to be the same Democrat that all the other Democrats are. Right.
There's this guy that's coming up in the Midwest. I believe he's in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. He is an iron worker. And so he did this ad. I believe it's challenging. I believe it is Wisconsin. I believe it's challenging Paul Ryan, but I need to, check my facts. But he did this ad, and basically he said, I'm an iron worker. My family's in the ironwork community. I'm in the mines, and I'm a Democrat, and healthcare is important to me, and this is important to me. Right. And I'll tell you what. How about Paul Ryan, or whoever it was that he was running against? You come back, and I'll go to Washington. He's like, I'll go to. He's like, well, how about you work these mines, and I'll go to Washington.
And 80 mine people who are really in the mines anymore. But that's good. That's good. That's a great strategy, right? You're gonna have to change. We're gonna have to change the way we are speaking and communicating with the people who think that we are run of the mill Washington politicians.
Right. And we have to diversify we have to diversify the way the party is represented. Absolutely. Because let's just use the iron mining community. Right. That community would typically go red, right? Yep. They would typically go with, Rust Belt and all this and that, and they don't see themselves in the Democratic Party. They don't see blue collar workers don't see themselves. So how do we identify different candidates who we still come together around our economics, around the fact that we believe that there should be safety net programs, that we believe that middle class and lower income people should have the majority of wealth.
Because that's who are in the mines.
No matter versus the 1%. Right. But but we all, our politics in a lot of ways when it comes to foundational things are the same, but we look different. We have folks who work in the mine, blue collar folks. We have brown people. We have Asian people, white people. We have gay people and straight people. We have all of these things that bring us together. So I know that a lot of people were really excited about these ads, and were really saying, now this, because what they said when they talked about John Ossoff, from what I was hearing, was it's not just about you're a Democrat, but who you are. Are you vibrant? Do people relate to you? Do they connect with you? And I think people were excited probably because he was young and he was, but he wasn't connecting. You have to have a personality that attracts people to you.
And you have to give a reason for people a reason to change. Absolutely. Why am I going to change what I know and what I am for you? And if it's not a compelling enough reason, it's not going to happen.
As much as we don't like Donald Trump, he did have an attractive quality to people who who doesn't want to be a millionaire?
Right.
So they were like, yeah, I want to be a millionaire. And, this dude is not trying to share with you. He continues to show that he will continue to keep the wealth within his little tight circle.
Look at the healthcare bill.
But he will promote the image and make you think that, you can join my millionaire club with absolutely no intention, but it was attractive to people. So we have to have candidates with charisma and that have a platform and that are relatable,
right? And who is speaking a language for the people that are in their who are going to be voting, their constituency, and we know politicians. Always goes back to Hillary, who didn't go to Wisconsin.
Right.
For the last 3 months.
I don't know why she didn't do that either.
And so she wasn't she felt like, I'm going to take you for granted and I'm going to disregard you and your needs and not come and talk to you and get down on the carpet with you and find out what it is you want from me. And I'll tell you I can do it for you because you're my people too. And that's what people want to hear. They want relatability.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, 45 was able to relate in a way that, and not even because it was that they were the same, but because he was different and they felt so disenfranchised and different too. And I feel like that was ultimately what got
well, also there was the help of the Russian interference. I don't want to fail to mention that there was Russian and I guess I'll push this in just for a second. But of course, another piece of big news that came out this week was the fact that the Obama administration was aware quite earlier than October when everybody else became aware that there was Russian interference in the election. And so this continues to be a huge story. Yeah. I mean, as they laid out, the Post had this really long article about all the different things that the Obama administration knew and how the administration was in this, very precarious position of trying to decide whether or not to do something or not do something. And ultimately, they probably did less than they could have, right? Yeah, and so you have people like Jay Johnson saying, I think we choked. I just want to say that wasn't the best soundbite because that's now been utilized by 45 many times. Right. But you have folks saying, hey, we probably could have done differently. Hindsight is 50-50. Excuse me, 2020. Girl, 50-50.
Or 50-50.
You can tell I wear glasses because I don't know nothing about the proper numbers for perfect vision. But anywho, you wear glasses too, so you're like, 50-50. Okay,
50-50, that's good to me.
No, but hindsight is 2020, and so with that being said, of course, all the things we could have done, but the article just talked about Obama was in a tight position.
Absolutely.
He did not want to be accused of influencing the election in a way that would discredit the election. Right. He thought Clinton was going to win. I mean, that was probably his biggest mistake. Yeah. And so they chose to do things, but not the most dramatic things that they could have done. And so now, here you go. Here's Donald Trump. All we do is
now he's tweeting it that
all we do is win.
Right. And then tweeting about how Obama knew about Russia. His fail, and so he's deflecting because yes, Obama knew about Russia, but you were actually in Russia. I mean, so there's a difference. So that's what he knew. So it's. It definitely, I believe that from what I've read, that the Obama administration should have definitely pulled the trigger and said something, just even if it had been a statement. I think that would have covered their butts a bit more and and had more transparency.
But I think but
I think
Trump
he probably
now,
also knew. Well, he's going to deflect and defer to Obama.
Well, I'm saying, but I think the other pieces that people were saying was like, well, he served it up for them. He served it up for Trump now in terms of, there's definitive evidence. It really played out in a way that was to your favor in terms of you won, great. Okay, so now what are you going to do? Putin, your buddy Putin, all these, Mike Flynn, all these people, Jeff, all these people that you've put in place, even Rex Tillerson, who have these great relationships with Russia. Well, now what's going to happen? Because there is no more evidence needed, really.
Right. And, so what it is doing is, it's definitely so now that Obama's in the mix, now Trump is definitely, there is a Russia thing. So now he's more inclined to say, so even to shoot himself in the foot, right? Because the big Russia piece and thing is that your involvement. But as long as you're putting Obama on it, and now he's saying that it is a thing, now the investigation, we're going to continue to investigate. And the more we dig, we're going to find you. But, we'll see. I definitely think Obama should have said something more, but I definitely think that Russia could be more detrimental to Trump than anybody else. So,
yeah, well, this is one of those never-ending sagas, I feel. And, one of the things that I heard folks saying this week was, in terms of the voters really don't care about Russia. No. I mean, they are. So going back to what do Democrats need to do? Mm-hmm. Democrats need to let the Russia thing play itself out. Absolutely. Because we've already decided that he's not getting impeached. So at the end of the day, let's hope they put some measures in place to protect the integrity of the next elections that are coming. But the Democrats need to be focused on the issues, like some of the things we're going to talk about shortly, like health care. But before we go there, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about a Twitter pic that went viral in D.C. this week.
The boys selling water. Well, they were selling. You didn't see the picture of them selling water. You saw the picture of them handcuffed.
Right.
Because they were selling water.
3 black boys, 16 and 17-year-old, sitting on the ground in handcuffs.
For doing what? If you're in D.C. or any probably major metropolis during the heat and you're driving down the street, you will see water for $1, water for $1. So basically that's what they were doing. Selling their water for $1, which you do need a permit for,
right? Because they were on the Capitol federal land,
federal lands, right?
But the Capitol Police, this piece right here, this was the worst. Right. I mean, the tweet went viral. For many of us who do this work with young people, as we've been talking about again and again on this podcast and in other settings, it's hard enough for our community to be treated fairly.
Right.
I'm not saying these boys should have been selling without a permit, but if there ever was a white collar crime,
right,
selling without a permit is most certainly it. And as we know, the worst thing that was going to happen when the park police said, hey, you can't sell this water, was they were going to run away. Right. That was the very worst thing.
Or they would have left when you told them to leave.
But for them to handcuff them, embarrassed. If I was those children's mother, I would be mortified. You handcuff them. Now my child's picture is all over the region,
the world,
right? For selling water, and I would like my children sell lemonade all the time.
I was going to say that is it. You took the word lemonade right. You pulled it right out of my mouth. I was going to say, so every lemonade stand in America is in jeopardy.
Right, and we know that if these were children that looked different, that would not have been the situation. They would have received at minimum, first of all, they probably would have got a smile.
They might have bought the water from them.
Right, they probably would have like, oh, that's so sweet of you. But our boys aren't sweet. Our boys aren't cuddly.
There's reasonable fear.
Right, there's fear, right? Here are 3 brown-skinned black men with wild-looking hair because they had their hair all out and stuff like that. And water, and where's your permit, sir? You don't have one. Let me put these cuffs on you, because that's what we do. So, it was very disheartening. I was very angry. There was so many different ways that could have been handled. Oh, yeah. And then for the U.S. Park Police. Now, here's what's really annoying me, too, about the whole thing. So not just that it happened, not just that you traumatized these children, not just that you put their picture all over the internet. You might say that wasn't your fault, but it was, because if you didn't put handcuffs on them, that wouldn't have happened. Right. So now everybody knows it's all up in their business. There is no anonymity for the young person. But on top of all of that, the U.S. Park Police wants to make it go away. Yeah. They said that it's being blown. Here are their words. It's being blown out of proportion. I don't think if you put handcuffs on my child, it's being blown out of anything. You did it, and you're going to be accountable for it. Right. Then there was a tweet that came out from several council people, including our Eleanor Holmes Norton, who said she wanted to meet with the Capitol Police. And their tweet was, well, we've already talked about this already. See, they want to sweep this under the rug because it's not their children, right? But we know that our boys,
is these boys who are used to handcuffs, they'll be okay.
Disproportionate minority contact is real. It's real. And it starts just like this.
Yep. For something small.
I'm so thankful. Let me big up DC, though. I'm so thankful that this thing went viral because of the outrage of the District of Columbia community who said,
we love our bubble.
too many people were like, this is not right.
Yep.
And I'm grateful for everyone, including the tour guide that
Yes.
started the tweet. Thank you, sir, for recognizing that this was not the way
This is
the
not
situation
okay.
should be handled. Thank you, Tim. Shout out to you, and shout out to all the other people that did not push this under the rug.
Right.
It was in the Washington Post.
Yep.
It was retweeted thousands of times. And guess what, Park Police? I think you'll think twice before you come up on some black boys again who are selling water and put them in handcuffs.
Or
Shame on you.
Any child in handcuffs, but definitely, I mean, like you said, 90% of me believes that if this were children of another ilk, it would not have happened.
Yes, any child. That's right. Thank you for broadening it.
Right.
Shame on you for putting
Shame on you.
handcuffs on
On
children who are trying to do
Get a
what would be
summer
called
dollar.
entrepreneurship
Right.
in
Any
any other
well,
place.
right, anywhere else.
So moving on. I just had to take a deep breath
That
after
was
that because
good.
I'm just gonna get
Right.
myself all upset because
Right,
you
because
know,
what you think about lemonade stand? It's the same. It's the equivalent. I got this water. I'm going to buy it for 50 cents, sell it for $1. It's brilliant.
I mean,
Do
we're
it.
teaching kids entrepreneurship anywhere else, you know. So we're
And-
going to teach them to get a permit now. I am going to
Right,
do that. I'm
right,
going to make
right.
sure we do
Get the
that.
permit,
But
right.
you know, but
Ugh.
I'm really glad though that this issue came to light.
And we're glad it happened in D.C. because in D.C., minimally now these boys won't feel like they are criminals. They'll
No,
feel like they
very
are
supported,
they're
right?
supported.
They're very
And,
supported.
You know, we hate that it had to happen to you, but you know that you were in a place that is not going to stand for you being marginalized and, you know, acting like you're criminalized, more importantly.
right, absolutely.
All right. So what's next on our...
Well, the health bill, I think, is what's next.
coming.
That's a juicy
is.
piece of legislation that has lots and lots to be worried about.
Yep. No, and no Democrats are going to. That's been in the news, and nobody obviously is going to is checking for this. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he can't afford any more than 2 Republicans to denounce it. They have to be everybody. He has to have no. If 2 say no, then it's over. Then this bill is dead.
Well, he has 8 people right now that are saying no.
Right.
4
And one of
on
them-
the
right, one of them-
conservatives and
and
4 on the 4 that are like leaning like the
like-
Democrats. They're worried about Medicaid, and then
Right.
the other 4 that think that it's not harsh enough.
Right. So crazy and then not so crazy. But Senator Dean Heller from Nevada, he said that he couldn't support it because of Medicaid cuts. And so he's one of the 4 from Medicaid who's just like, he's more of one of the sane, saying that these cuts are going to be, I mean, because you think about Medicaid and what it covers and what, I mean, it's so, who was the guest that was talking about the HIV care?
Allison,
and how that is tantamount to genocide if Medicaid, in the way it's written now, gets cut for HIV services.
Right.
I
Absolutely.
mean,
and not just HIV services, nursing care.
Everything.
Nursing care is
anything
huge.
that has to do with poor. You know, so any of the services for young poor, old poor, they're going to wipe them out. And these are things and these are cuts that we cannot afford to have. And not only and then the staggering price of insurance where it's going to go because of the cuts. It's like, so you're going to cut my insurance and then you're going to make me pay more. And I can't even, the reason that I'm in the affordable insurance is because I cannot pay more.
I mean, it was so foolish. I heard someone this morning talking about, they're talking, you got to watch their words. Remember a couple podcasts ago, we were talking about the words, right? So they're going to say, we're going to slow down spending. That's how they talk about it, because they don't want to say we're going to cut Medicaid, right? So they said we're going to slow down spending, but then they said we're going to slow down spending and then you'll get your care on the traditional insurance market. Well, I would get my care on the traditional insurance market if I could afford it.
Right.
So
Medicaid.
I'm probably not going to be able to. I'm medicated because I can't afford to buy
I don't have
insurance.
Medicaid because I'm a princess.
I mean, this is what I'm saying. They just say anything, and people just nod their heads. You have to really puncture the propaganda. You know.
Yep. I like that. Puncture the propaganda.
I thought that sounded good.
It is. So billions is going to be taken from coverage and the poor to help fund tax cuts for the wealthy.
And that's the crazy thing. Yeah. The tax cuts that will impact the upper 2%. So they're moving it from the 1% to the 2%, $500 billion in tax cuts to the upper 2%. That's what they're going to do instead. And then they're going to give tax cuts to the rich. And then they're going to take Medicaid from the poor. That's pretty much what this bill is all about.
If you want to, make it as simple and plain so people can understand it, and if you want to have a sufficient amount of outrage about it, that's what it is. They're taking from you to give to the rich.
So it's real. And the other piece about it, so we have these 8 senators that are saying they won't vote for it.
Right.
And so there's an opportunity here, particularly for those folks like Paul Rand who is conservative.
Crazy.
Forget about him.
That
group of 4, Ted Cruz, they cray. So we can't deal with them, right? The other 4, we have Susan Collins.
Yes. If Medicaid is your issue, these are the 4 we need to talk to.
Susan Collins. You have the woman from West Virginia. You have the person from Alaska, and you also have Nevada. Yeah. So those are our 4 right now that have actively come out and said, I'm really, really worried about Medicaid being cut, because one thing that folks do know about the ACA, about the Affordable Care Act, was that the Medicaid expansion was very successful. They like to talk a lot about how it was a failure, and where Obamacare had a lot of problems was about the requiring requiring insurance and making people pay, and a lot of people didn't like that. But where it was very popular, and where all those extra people that came onto insurance
were the really
was
poor.
Through Medicaid.
Yeah, and
This Medicaid expansion, by basically they pushed the threshold up so that you didn't have to be the extreme poor to get Medicaid, right? And so what they want to do now is say, okay, this new income level that was higher, that allowed more people to qualify, we're going to push it back down, and so these folks will no longer be eligible. And we know in states, like West Virginia. Remember, we had Natasha here a couple weeks ago, and she talked about how that West Virginia is desolate in a lot of places. It has really been hit hard. So we know if Medicaid goes away in West Virginia, it's devastating.
Because they don't even have jobs to get insurance from. So this Medicaid is it for them. So you say, oh, we'll do it in the more traditional. There is not an option of that for these people. For a lot of the people on Medicaid, the reason that they have it is because they're not working jobs that offer insurance. They're not in a position to pay for personal or traditional insurance. So Medicaid is the savior. It is their lifesaver. It is how they are here in maintaining life, literally.
The other pieces that are really threatened to be cut, things we've talked about before, maternity care,
babies,
mental health services. And so we know Planned Parenthood, of course, is really targeted in this act to just eliminate Planned Parenthood, which is very frightening for all of the individuals, poor and not poor.
Poor and not poor, because Planned Parenthood, let's say this, is 100% not paying. I mean, the federal government, the money that they get from the federal government, 100% of it, none of it can be used for abortion services. Say that again. None of the money that Planned Parenthood gets from the federal government can be used for abortion services. Any of those services come from whoever's coming in for that. That is when your personal money must be used. So for these people who are thinking that this is what Planned Parenthood is, no, Planned Parenthood is where I go to get screened to make sure I don't have cervical cancer. Planned Parenthood is where I go to get a mammogram to make sure I don't have breast cancer. Planned Parenthood is where I go to make sure I don't get an STD or I don't already have an STD. These are the services, larger, broader, more important, and the abortion services that people are so scared of make up maybe less than 3% of the bigger, brighter picture of what Planned Parenthood is. And so whenever we say Planned Parenthood, we have to, I feel like, let people know exactly what it is, what it looks like, because they're looking at it as this machine that is just taking babies, and that's not the case. That's the little piece of the big, big puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not even
and I've utilized Planned Parenthood in my past.
I have too.
I think so.
When I was in college, I mean, how was I else going to? I mean, I didn't have a job. I didn't have. I mean, there was no gap in. I wouldn't think I was on my mom or after college. So that's where we go.
And Planned Parenthood offers an important resource for. Yes. Not everyone wants to explain to their parents whose insurance they're under why they need birth control.
Exactly.
Or why they need some type of exam.
When I'm 18 and I'm technically an adult, but I'm still under my mom's insurance, and I can go and get my own birth control and have a sense of pride and dignity and knowing that I'm doing what's right. You're right, Sheila, because that's actually when I went.
Yeah, so I mean, this assault on Planned Parenthood is ridiculous, and I appreciate the point that you just made about the abortion. because the abortions rather that people are so concerned about, and I understand that. However, federal dollars don't support that anyway. So you're defunding of Planned Parenthood is funding making people a lot less healthy, right?
And people are going to then take their money to another place and get their abortion somewhere else in the same area, or if they don't have them, then it's going to make them more deadly. I mean, we're going to go back into ancient times where women go into coat hangers, and that is real. I mean, you're not going to stop people from doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
So let's make it safe.
Absolutely. So I think what I do think we're going to see, because it's going to be 2 weeks before we're back here again.
2 weeks, yes.
And so here's one of the things I do think based on what I've been hearing. I think, there was this goal for them to hurry up and pass this bill before the 4th of July.
Right.
I don't know why.
It's all symbolism.
Right. Well, really, because they just want to get to the tax cuts. But I don't know why they're rushing to get to the tax cuts, because they put the tax cuts in the health care bill. So everything with them is just, it's tax cuts dressed up as health care.
Right.
Tax cuts dressed up as, whatever.
Whatever it is.
So it seems as though there are other people that are on the fence in the Senate that really don't want to pass this bill this week. So I think the very first victory we will have as Democrats can be, or as people who are concerned about the health of our country, really. So let me open it up and say it's not a Democrat issue. No. It's a universal issue, is to push our senators this week not to be in support of a vote. So we're talking about pushing those 4 states that we told you about, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The ACT UP piece, but it's really important. So I really do think that we're going to see the vote delayed, or at least I hope so.
From your lips to God's ears, right? That is fingers crossed, toes crossed, eyes crossed, because that, again, if the bill passes, it's going to be devastating.
Also, this week we're going to get the CBO score, and that's going to be really important. Yes. That's going to tell us how many Americans will lose insurance as a result of this bill.
Right, because they're estimating it about 20 million.
Yeah, last I heard was 23 million. So it's going to be more than 23 million. It's going to be less than 23 million. So that's going to be an important piece of information. So we'll be looking forward to that. So from what I understand, the Democrats are considering how to slow the process down, which I think they should do that.
They should.
Delay. So there's something that folks have been talking about called filibuster by amendment.
Oh.
And so I think that's just a strategy
creative
of
politics.
Right. It's the creativity of the political process. You hear a lot of people saying, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. But, there's all these maneuvers. There's all these maneuvers, like this whole passing it by reconciliation, which only requires 52 votes versus 60. That's a, maneuver. So this amendment, filibuster by amendment,
so funny
is
how
maneuver.
All of these maneuvers, maneuvering wasn't going on.
Right, but we didn't know about it.
Privy to so much maneuvering and I call it double dutching since this man has been in office. It's like, what? How are you doing this? How is this even possible? What is going on? I feel like it's a roller coaster of just ducking and dodging and ups and downs. And so if we need to do the the filibuster by amendment to get it, then we might need to start our maneuvering, I guess. So
Nancy Pelosi and all your people, do what you need to do.
Do what you need to do. Right. This health care bill cannot pass. It cannot.
Well, we've had a full week. We didn't have a guest this week, and we didn't run out of things to talk about.
I think we were okay. I think we can fill an hour, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, that's right. We sure can. Well, I think we have some really exciting things, too, coming up next month. Yeah. I know on deck we have some folks talking about immigration. Yes. We have folks talking about how do you turn red seats blue. We have some folks talking about the ban, which we haven't heard folks talk about too much recently.
Right.
So we have a really exciting July coming up. So I'm looking forward to spending more time with you, Sabria, and other women.
Yes,
talking this politics stuff. So what's going to be our act up before we get out of here today?
I think you hit the nail on the head. We need to push for this healthcare bill not to pass. And so the states where the senators that are leaning because of Medicaid we said Alaska, Nevada,
West Virginia.
West Virginia, and was it Louisiana?
Susan Collins.
Susan Collins.
Wherever she represents.
So those are the 4. And so call, write, protest. Get the people that you know in these states. Nevada, my brother James. Alaska, don't know anybody there. And West Virginia don't. But if you do, those are the places that you need to tell your folks to get out. Be loud, be vocal. Make it so that it's difficult and uncomfortable for your senators, because it should be. They should not even be considering passing this.
Right. If you go, I think Indivisible has become my second favorite website. They have a really nice piece right now. The great thing about Indivisible, for folks that haven't gone on in some time, is they keep updating their information, which is nice. So right now they have targeted 10 key states, including Pennsylvania, where I'm from. So I want to shout out all my Pennsylvania people to please get on the phone. And they have scripts. They have scripts for all you have to do is go on their site, pull up your state or the state you're most connected with, read the script, and call the office and call. Again, as we mentioned before, they have to log all these calls. Their interns and things of that nature will be presenting the congressperson, with the senator, with, hey, we've received 150 calls today about, are you going to vote for this? Absolutely. So it's really important, and Indivisible makes it really easy for you. So if you haven't checked that site out, definitely do it. It will prepare you well for the calls that you're going to make.
Yes.
So I think that's it for us today.
That is it. I'm going to give a shout out since we last spoke. The Warriors won the NBA championship. Go Warriors.
Yay.
So, levity. There it is. That's the bright side to all of our conversation.
And I want to give a shout out to Lamont Clark, who had his 46th birthday yesterday. Happy birthday to our producer. And just shout out to all
doesn't crack.
Just give a shout out to all of our friends and family. And thank you, all of you guys, who are listening to us on Black Women Talk Politics. And we will catch you next time.
Awesome. See you later.